is a cover-up, which is obviously what you believe, who is responsible and why the secrecy?
Well, the cover-up goes back really to, I would say, towards the end of the Second World War. Because, you know, people have heard about the so-called Foo Fighters, which appeared during the war to the Axis pilots, to US Army Air Forces, Royal Air Force, German, Japanese, often described as fuzzy blobs. But in fact, there were sightings of enormous craft, such as the one in my book, which was a giant object seen by the entire crew of a Lancaster bomber, which all affected them at the time. And that information has never been released officially.
Okay, so very briefly, do you think the UK is in a cover-up?
Definitely.
So it's
most
not just
definitely.
The US?
Well, the way it was put to me quite a long time ago by a former director of MI6 was, Timothy, I think you'll find we leave that to the Americans.
If you get questions about your sources, you have to be very careful, and sometimes you actually have to throw in the odd red herring.
The way it was put to me quite a long time ago by a former director of MI6 was, Timothy, I think you'll find we leave that to the Americans.
Who is responsible and why the secrecy?
A la misma altura.
Hay unas nubes ahí, se ve de verde.
I mean, there is certainly a body of people who believe that many of the cutting-edge scientific discoveries that we've seen in recent decades actually came from the UFO that crashed at Roswell. And there are many people who believe that this technology is gradually being seeded out through, of course, predominantly American companies to get the technology out there, but to make sure America maintains the advantage.
Just to bring it back to the subject, Dr. Edgar Mitchell said that absolutely Roswell did happen.
Yes.
And he should know. He's been on the moon and 3 Apollo missions.
Well, yes. I mean, that is interesting. And, of course, it's not just Edgar Mitchell. Recently, there's been a lot of so-called deathbed testimony from the last few people who were actually there when Roswell happened in July of 1947, including Walter Haut, the public relations officer at the Army base. And he, in a signed affidavit that came out recently, said, yes, it was real, there was a crashed spaceship, there were aliens.
Is there anyone awake here?
Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell. I mean, what's your take on him?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso. I never met him, but I found a lot of his testimony credible. Unfortunately, the book was edited by William Burns, who injected a few slight inaccuracies in it, and I know that Corso himself was not happy about that because he told a friend of mine. For example, he said, Corso, that they actually waited until American, the industrial corporations were actually beginning to get a handle on some of these advanced technologies before passing over the materials that had been recovered from Roswell and perhaps elsewhere. So that was one of the most important things he wanted to put across. I know many people have said that, oh, we found that he wasn't on the National Security Council. Well, he wasn't on the National Security Council, but I've got his military records, and they show that he was on the National Security Council's intelligence staff for quite a few years as an intelligence officer, and he was involved with a special coordinations board which dealt with some of the most sensitive clandestine operations mounted by the United States government. So you know, he did have a very, very good intelligence background.
Is there anyone here?
Before Roswell, I mean, you speak about kind of aircraft crashes
Yes.
In the 40s.
Yes. Now, this is, I think, one of the main reasons for the cover-up. One of them, certainly at that time, for heaven's sakes, was that when the Americans, with the German scientists headed by Werner von Braun at White Sands Proving Ground, started test launching the captured Nazi V-2 rockets, the UFOs increased their surveillance, and they started buzzing the rockets, and in several cases causing them actually to crash or come down to Earth prematurely. And one of these instances was actually officially confirmed in a local newspaper, which I've reproduced in the book. And the director of the White Sands missile base says that unexplained phenomena were responsible for bringing down the rocket. Now, what happened then was the Americans renewed their effort to try and get one of these craft or more down for evaluation. They succeeded, and all hell let loose, because all over the world, not just in the United States, aircraft crashes, many completely unexplained crashes, not just military planes sent to intercept UFOs, which were being reported in the press every day at that time, but worldwide, and civilian airliners. And typically, what happened was planes would be able to get off the ground. In aviation terms, they call that unsticking, unable to get off the ground, and would crash either at the end of the runway or shortly after takeoff, killing passengers. So it's not just military planes. And the official explanation invariably was the aircraft ran out of fuel. How many planes run out of fuel just after taking off? You know, it just doesn't make up. But nobody really questioned it too much at that time. But an emergency situation was declared by President Truman at the time. And this started in around April, May of 1947. And there have been...
So how many of these crashes were there?
Well, I don't know the exact figures, but I know now the Defense Department figures from 1952 to 1956. There were 18,662 crashes, of which 9.5% were unexplained. And that's 1,773 crashes which were due, as it says officially, to unexplained causes, unknown causes. I know from my own sources that quite a number of solid craft have been recovered. I know that communications have been established since the early 1940s with select individuals in the military and intelligence community, very, very occasionally within governments, such as a few presidents have had contact. So the proof is all there. As to evidence, there is excellent evidence that we have in the civilian world of actual craft. I've produced color photographs of an apparent alien in my last book, Unearthly Disclosure, photographs taken in Italy in 1993, which I'm convinced are absolutely genuine.
But you didn't see the real thing?
I didn't see the real thing.
Oops.
But
because it could be slightly paper mache. Sorry, my ear thing.
it could be, but I hired a forensic scientist who works for the police on imagery to study the photographs, which were Polaroids, and I made copies from the original, examined the originals myself. And furthermore, the witness had, on one occasion, a close-up sighting encounter with this creature when it was photographed. So that's the best I can come up with, but, you know, believe me, they've got a lot of better information hidden behind closed doors. You know, one of my friends, and the chap who actually wrote the foreword to my latest book, Bill Gunston, is arguably the world's leading aviation historian, and he is convinced that there's no way the Germans could have produced advanced circular flying craft during World War II. They were certainly testing circular flying machines, but there's no way they could have been responsible for all the Foo Fighter sightings and sightings of much larger objects. Had the Germans been responsible, they would have won the war.
Right, but do you think the Germans at that point perhaps had contact with the extraterrestrials as well?
No, I've heard this rumour. I don't discount it. I think later on, certainly, there was contact established with German scientists, particularly those working on the United States space program. But as to earlier than that, I very much doubt it. And I think a lot of material has come out via Nazi propagandists about Hitler escaping to South America and, you know, with fleets of flying saucers and with a base in Antarctica and so forth.
Right, and something else that I found really interesting was you spoke about Kennedy's trip, President Kennedy's trip to see the alien bodies.
Yes.
I mean, sorry, would you mind elaborating for our viewers on that?
No. I was informed by a reliable source attached to JFK's source, White House staff, that in 1961, 1962, John Kennedy requested the observation of actual alien bodies, which he had learned had been recovered by the military. And his wish was granted, and he was taken on Air Force One. The plane was full of generals. It was led by General McHugh, was in charge of the operation. It was a top secret mission. Kennedy saw the bodies. He was taken to Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, and the bodies were located at a special medical facility at that site.
I mean, do you think that had something to do with his assassination?
I don't know, but there are several pointers that might indicate some truth to that rumor. Like the rumors associated with Marilyn Monroe, I don't discount those either. There are some very strange things about her.
So you believe Marilyn Monroe was murdered?
I don't know, but I'm very suspicious about the suicide, particularly since she was connected with both Kennedys, JFK and his brother. So there is some possibility there for a good conspiracy theory. My information is that there are some highly advanced craft, some of them spacecraft, which certainly the Americans and maybe one or two other governments, I don't know yet, but certainly the Americans are flying, and I think they've been in service for quite some time. And of course this gives rise to all sorts of questions about unidentified flying objects. Just how many of the above top secret craft that the Americans have are normally seen in you know, unrestricted areas is very questionable, but I think some sightings must relate to that. Now, as to what type of technology is involved, I believe it involves anti-gravity and highly sophisticated means of transport. In 1993, Ben Rich, who headed the Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, which developed the stealth F-117 plane, said in the presence of two friends of mine at the University of California, that we have the technology now to go to the stars. He confirmed this, but he also said that all this is hidden in above top secret black budget programs, and he said it would take an act of God to bring this out into the civilian world for the benefit of humanity. So that's very interesting. In 1993, here's a man who was in a position to know, who says that we already have the technology, short of a few equations, he said, in 1993, I hasten to add. Now, the sketch beneath this photograph of a Japan Airlines cargo plane was made by the pilot of this Jumbo 747 in 1986, following the sighting of a gigantic UFO near Anchorage, which was also tracked on radar. And there below is his sketch of this walnut-shaped object. And I don't know if viewers can see, but the size of the plane underneath it, to the right underneath the rim, the lip of the craft, for comparison, shows that it absolutely dwarfed. This was an enormous object, and it was seen by the entire crew, and as I say, tracked on radar, and that was confirmed by civil aviation authorities and the CIA, who tried to discredit the story.
You have a number of sources which you keep referring to. I mean, are all of these sources, do they kind of speak off the record? Do some of them wish to remain anonymous?
Some of them speak definitely off the record, that's for sure. Others feel that certain information, the time has come to reveal this information. And I'm not the only reporter, if you like. I'm a professional writer of books, not a journalist as such, though I have written articles for newspaper, but I hold a press card. And I know that a number of very distinguished journalists in the United States, for example, have been given some of the basics of this information, so that it's not as if we're all going to be completely unprepared. But it's not just in the United States, by the way, where I have acquired information.
So where else in the world have you acquired this information?
Well, I'd rather not say, actually, but
okay.
certain countries.
Okay, so would you say that some countries are more forthcoming than others?
I would definitely say that, yes.
Okay, but you're unable to say which countries?
And I would say also that the information I get is very, very occasional, and it's really like fitting pieces to a jigsaw.
But do you kind of vet all of your sources? I mean, can someone
Absolutely.
just turn up and say, I work for the
I have to be
military?
very, very, very careful, and I usually check out their credentials and I'm often introduced through somebody else. You need very, very high security clearances to get anywhere near these programs, which include an alien liaison program. Contact has been established.
But you've managed to get close enough to amass all this wealth of information.
Yes, I have.
So surely it can't be that difficult. I mean, you've been...
No, and it's not just military and scientific intelligence personnel who've had contact. People from all walks of life, and I hasten to emphasize that. All walks of life, not just farmers in the outback, have had communications with extraterrestrials. I would say tens of thousands. Take 1954, for example, Air Marshal Sir Peter Horsley. He was Deputy Chief of Strike Command with his finger on the nuclear trigger at the time. He was an equerry, a military attaché for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh for 7 years at Buckingham Palace when this event happened to him. Now, first of all, he actually, at some time in the 50s, was working in the Ministry of Defense Operations Room, dealing with UFOs and collaborating with the Americans, and he could never get near their top secrets. But he claims to have had a 2-hour meeting with an extraterrestrial human being in the middle of London, arranged for him via a British Army general.
Fabulous.
And I spoke to him at great length about that, and I'm convinced he was telling the truth. And one of the most disturbing things he found during that encounter was that this alien knew all Britain's top secret nuclear secrets and knew everything that was in Sir Peter's mind. When the wall came down, late '88 I think it was, I was invited to the former Soviet Union, and I appeared on television. And they were very, very open about the subject. I was talking about all sorts of things for at least a half an hour on a live program in St. Petersburg. It's very interesting. In 1977, this is not generally known, that a 10 to 12-year top-secret program to investigate UFOs by the military was established by President Andropov. this was initiated in 1977 by President Yuri Andropov, who used to be, for much longer than he was president, head of the KGB. That's the Soviet CIA. And he initiated this program because the military was getting gravely concerned about the intrusion of UFOs, and 4 million soldiers were involved throughout the territories of the Soviet Union to investigate. They were told to look for them, to take down details of any reports and so forth, and pass it up the line. And it was classified top secret code word. Top secret Institute 22 was the additional code word to that program.
Top secret with 4 million people involved.
4 million soldiers, and the information did not come out until about 10 years ago.
Do you agree with David Icke's work?
I don't think so. Does he write about UFOs? I don't think so.
Yeah, he writes about UFOs and reptilians.
Oh, reptilian aliens. I find it very hard to take that seriously, I have to say.
So you do believe in aliens, but not reptilian aliens?
There have been a few sightings of aliens with reptilian-type skin, yes. But as to aliens inhabiting human bodies, I don't buy it.
Okay.
I have no evidence for it. I've never learnt that myself from my own investigations.
So what's your opinion on chemtrails?
Well, I have to say, I've no doubt that chemicals have been sprayed for various purposes at various times, but to the great height involved to spray chemicals from aircraft at thousands of feet up, 30,000 feet or more, is absurd, because the particles would dissipate. There's absolutely no way they can target anything like that. So I'm totally unconvinced by that, I'm afraid.
What about alien abduction?
Definitely, people have been abducted. That's the bottom line. Probably tens of thousands of people, maybe millions. I don't know the figure. We know that, just like UFOs, the majority can be explained. There are an awful lot of wannabes in the abduction field.